Hello and welcome to a bonus episode of the British Sitcom History Podcast. I'm Gareth and with me as always is Alan.
Hello.
And today we are going to talk about some live theatre experiences that Alan has been enjoying in the last few months. So, because Alan, you live in that London, whereas I'm up in Yorkshire. So you have plenty more opportunities to go and see high-profile megastar events. And what we thought we'd do is you went to 4 shows last year, and we thought we'd talk about all of them kind of in one go as a bonus episode. So why don't you just tell us what are the 4 events/shows that you went to see that we're going to discuss today?
Yes, okay. Well, like I said, I went to see Fawlty Towers, the play, when that came out, and we did a little bonus on that. So, I like to go and see everything and sort of amalgamate everything into one and just have a little chat about all the things I've seen. In fact, I did go out of London for one thing as well, I've just thought of. I went to see Marks and Gran talking at the Felixstowe Book Festival. Lawrence Marks and Maurice Gran talking about their sitcom writing days. That was quite an interesting little hour of Q&A kind of thing. Uh-huh. They're very engaging people, and they've got a nice sort of wry little... They've obviously just been knowing each other for 70 years or whatever it is, you can tell they've got a good
double act going.
Yeah. And I can't remember which one's which.
Marks or Gran?
Yeah. So, one of them's the talkative one, the other one was just sort of he just wanted to get it done and get out of there. But yeah, they were quite interesting. But yeah, I'm trying to take advantage of my London lifestyle. And I went to see, what did I go and see? Let me have a think. Let me collate all these into one list. Su Pollard, Fully Charged.
Su Pollard, Fully Charged. That's what the show was called.
I believe that's what it was called, yes. And then An Afternoon with Gloria.
Mm-hmm.
That was meeting.
And I know what this is.
Meeting.
The way you phrased that as a question is if I'm supposed to guess who it was, but I know who it was. You've told me who it was. An Afternoon with Gloria, starring
Melvin Hayes.
Melvin Hayes, of course.
Yes, I'll just tell you about that in a second. Then I saw a tribute to Steve Brown. We Love Steve Brown, I believe it was called.
So Steve Brown died early 2024, didn't he?
He did.
And just with the risk of spoiling that part of the show today, Steve Brown will probably be best known to our listeners as Glenn Ponder, the band leader in Knowing Me, Knowing You with Alan Partridge. Indeed,
but he was actually the band leader for the show, and he was in fact a musician, sort of composer in his career. Yes. Just doing double time as a character in that show. And then the last thing I saw was a dramatisation of Hancock's Half Hour. A few lost episodes of Hancock's Half Hour acted out on the stage.
Okay, that's good. Well, let's go through these one by one. Why don't we start with Su Pollard? So, Fully Charged, you say? So, tell me more about that. What was the show? What was the premise of the show?
So, I went to see the first preview. They did 4 preview shows up at a little venue in North London before going on a national tour, which, as you listen to this, should still be going on. It's sort of a year-long tour, right. And so I went to see the first preview, and the show is... It's essentially, Su Pollard comes out and tells anecdotes about her career.
Does she sing, Alan?
Does she sing? About 8 or 9 songs, I would say. Quite a lot of singing. Okay. But she is a singer. She always was. And so it's all songs from shows she's been in, mostly, and that sort of thing.
The songs that I would know, or like familiar songs, or just stuff
mostly
that she knows?
No, it's mostly, it was songs from the shows, and she was, she was Miss Hannigan and Annie for quite a while, so she did that song.
That Annie song, that one from Annie?
Yeah, that one, that Miss Hannigan one from Annie.
I've got no idea which one you mean.
It's the one
listeners will know. Fill in the gaps, Google it.
It'll be the one Miranda Hart did when we talked about Miranda doing musical theatre.
I do remember you showing me a video of that, yeah.
Yeah, so it is essentially just her telling stories, but it is kind of presented in a little bit more of a not dramatization, but there's a set. It's kind of set up like a dressing room kind of vibe. There's wigs and things knocking about, all stuff from the show. Like you can see there's the Heidi High outfit there, and all that kind of thing. And then she had a musical accompanist. She had a little pianist in the corner. And he was just, obviously there to do the music, but then she bantered a little bit with him here and there.
So the question is, is she still mad?
Yeah. Do you know what, actually? Yeah. Like I said, it was the first preview, and it wasn't like a Q&A. It wasn't her, like someone setting her off and her telling her. It's a scripted show. So they've kind of written it all down, what she's going to say and how. And I think it did lose a little vitality because of that. You know, her natural kind of effervescence. Not a lot. She was still Su Pollard.
But presumably they've had to do that in order to, you know, keep it to time and keep it on track and so on.
And
am I being unfair there?
And just to make sure that it is a show rather than just, come and do a Q&A. Because actually they did the show and then had a little Q&A afterwards in which people from the audience could ask questions and things like that. So they had that bit as well. But then the show itself tells the whole story of her career, a little bit about her like when she was married to someone and like little bits and pieces like that, and then she had a hit single, you know, just like it's a little overview of her career in quite a nice potted way. It's not exactly an exposing warts and all kind of thing, but I don't know if there's that many warts to be seen, really. She's not hiding much, is she?
I was going to ask that. Were there any snippets of information about Heidi High or You Rang My Lord?
Not really. Everyone who talks about anything with Perry and Croft, they're always just, we were a family, it was amazing, everyone was lovely. Yeah. So they all say that. It's like, it must be true. You know,
I can believe it. You know, that's what it looks like when you watch it.
Yeah. So nothing too scandalous or anything, but it was very interesting just to hear her tell these stories. She's done 48 years of panto in the last 50 years. She's done 48 pantos and still is. She's doing it.
What happened the other 2 years?
She was in Annie. She was doing Annie.
Whatever. I genuinely have got more respect for the artistic format of a pantomime than for musicals.
And you know, she was doing panto, you know, long before she was famous. You know, before Heidi High, she was just
a question
kind of
for you,
panto
Alan.
Person.
What's the money like in panto? You know, if you're, you know, you're not the big celeb. I guess Su Pollard was the big celeb, but you know, if you're third name on the cast in a panto in a sort of regional town theatre, what are you getting paid for that for a couple of months' work?
I'm not sure, really. Equity minimum is like £600 a week, so I suspect a lot of them hit that.
It's all right.
But back in the day, it was better. It was better in the 80s. You know, not in terms of inflation. Like you could a good 2 months worth of work on a panto every year sets you up for the rest of the year. Really, it was a big. Yeah. It was a big draw. In fact, Melvin Hayes mentioned this because he's done a lot of panto. We'll come on to Melvin Hayes in a minute, but he sort of said, "Oh, I wouldn't do it now. It's all you're doing 9 days a week, and you know you never stop. They're always pulling you in for publicity and blah blah blah. Used to be fun."
Hardest game in the world.
So
that's great.
So Su Pollard, so the show I saw, it was a little loose. It was the first preview, like I say, so I'm not going to judge too harshly.
Yeah, it's probably a little unfair.
Just a few of the jokes didn't quite land, or the rhythm wasn't there. It just needed tightening up. I think that will come with time regardless, but I saw the director in the back row scribbling notes and things like that. So they're obviously, they're going to be working that through. So it'd be good to see it again a little further down the line, because I think it would really sharpen up. And I think... as well with Su Pollard, you know, she didn't lose the script or anything like that, but there were definitely times when you could tell she basically was like, right, what's the next bit? You know, like it wasn't... So that, again, was affecting the energy a little bit, I think.
So you said this was a scripted thing and not just a Q&A and the start of a tour. In contrast, the Melvin Hayes show that you went, that was just a one-off, wasn't it? That was just a Q&A.
Yes, pretty much a one-off. It was organised by Talking Pictures TV.
So before we go any further, the Q&A, who was asking the questions, Alan?
Danny Baker.
Danny Baker? Yes. Danny Baker, you say?
Yes, Daz star Danny Baker.
Yeah, I like Danny Baker. I've got a lot of time for Danny Baker. Also, of course, famously the writer of the Peter Kay sitcom.
Cradle to Grave.
Which is obviously the only thing we know him for, because... That's our sitcom. That's our sitcom lens. But no, I do like Danny Baker. So how do you suppose Danny Baker got involved in this? Does he work for Talking Pictures?
I don't know. I don't think so directly. So Talking Pictures TV organised the event. So it was, you know, I think they're trying to expand just out of the TV station to just generally kind of that nostalgia market in one way or another. And they certainly seem to have a really good audience in terms of a loyal audience. People seem to really like what they're doing, just putting out old stuff, basically. People love that.
Yeah. Hey, listen, if anybody's going to get behind that, it's our listeners, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And they seem to put a lot of care into getting good quality prints and all that kind of thing. Yeah. It's all part of that business. And so they organised this event, and I think they're going to try and do more of them, more things like that. It was, in a nice little space below a pub. But in a performance sort of space, I don't know, probably about 90 people there. Nice little turnout. And yeah, Danny Baker was not in any of the promotional material. It wasn't like come and see Danny Baker thing. I think they managed to score him quite late on because nobody knew he was going to be doing it. Who was there? But he obviously had a very genuine knowledge of what he was talking about and love for just basically old films and old TV. He was just pulling out actors' names and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, it's his area, isn't it? Pop culture and his age. It's his, like, the stuff he was watching as a kid. Melvin Hayes was in them. He was 25 or whatever. He was,
Indeed. How old's Melvin Hayes now?
He's 89.
89, blimey. Yeah.
And to be fair, like, pretty seemed pretty on it. Like, certainly wasn't a little doddery old man as such. I mean, he was an old man, but seemed very alert. He could never remember anybody's name whenever he was trying to think of anything, but only in a normal kind of old person way. So it was really good. Danny Baker was great. Just sort of set him up. What about this film you did? And basically got him talking about certain things. But because he knew the context and the background, it meant he could ask really relevant questions.
That's really interesting, Alan. When you get these Q&A sessions, I think it's sometimes easy to overlook the importance of the moderator. You're there to see Melvin Hayes, but without an informed and intelligent questioner, it can drift, can't it? It can, it can Su Pollard.
Well, to be fair, Su Pollard...
That's unkind. That's not fair. That was a joke.
No, they did a Q&A with Su Pollard as well. They kind of did the show, and then sat down and the pianist sort of emceed a Q&A. But it was just basically, audience asks us a question. And then he did ask her a couple that must have been pre-prepared because she had a good solid anecdote like ready to go, so that was that. And then same with Melvin Hayes. I didn't get the impression that they'd really set up anything beforehand. But, obviously they asked him about the Cliff Richard stuff. They asked him about 8.5 Hot Mum. And then quite a few things from like much earlier in his career, which I wasn't particularly familiar with, to be honest. But he was a child actor, or rather, he was a teenage actor who then, because of his size, ended up playing sort of teenagers until he was in his late 20s. Because he's quite small, short.
I'm sort of doing the maths there. If he's 89 now, doesn't that mean he was 40 when It Ain't Half Hot Mum was made?
It Ain't Half Hot Mum was, 47 years ago? It's 1974. No, 1974 It Ain't Half Hot Mum started.
Yeah, that's 50 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah. So he would have been, pushing 40. That sounds about right.
Blimey. Okay, so that's... we need to... Well, I mean, that's one of the sitcoms we're going to have to go back and watch at some point. But, that seems a little old for a serving soldier in the Far East.
Yeah. But yeah, seemed like a lovely man, had a few stories to tell. Seemed a little bit kind of, I guess the word I'll use is humble.
All right.
Like he was pleasantly surprised that, people were interested in what he had to say, And the whole thing was kind of pushing Talking Pictures TV, but they didn't lay that on too thick. They was like that. They had a quiz. They had a little quiz. I was waiting for a meat raffle that didn't quite come.
I like a bit of interactive entertainment. That's great.
It was nice. Involved. Yeah, because they had an interval and kind of did a little quiz while Melvin was signing autographs and taking photographs with everyone and stuff like that.
Alan, if you didn't write those questions down so that we can create an episode, I'm going to be very disappointed.
Now the quiz,
you know how much I love a quiz.
They gave us this quiz paper and it was very difficult, like stuff that I didn't know. But then they ended up talking about most of it. So it was like, what film did he appear in 1952? And then it's like, talked about that. Anyway. So
nice.
It wasn't too bad.
Well, let's move on to the next one then. So we got Su Pollard and Melvin Hayes, and I guess slightly different formats, but a similar vintage performer. Steve Brown probably very different in terms of his history, his career.
Uh-huh.
And obviously, not to put too fine a point on it, he wasn't there. This was a memorial show.
A tribute to Steve Brown, yeah. He died early 2024. And as far as I understand, the person behind the show was Harry Hill. That's the sense I got, that he was the one who kind of set it up just by a couple of things that got mentioned. Apparently very good friends, and they did work together a lot. And Harry Hill was the host.
Right, okay.
Which was great, just seeing a bit of Harry Hill stand up. He, did a few bits and pieces.
I was going to say, did he do a bit? Did he MC it? Yeah, rather than just come out and speak.
Yeah, and like did some classic material as well, like just pretty standard Harry Hill stuff, but good. Still worked. Looks exactly the same as he did 30 years ago.
Joe, I went to see Harry Hill stand up his last tour, which was, I'm going to guess, 2 years ago, not long ago at all. And it was great. It was really, really great. I laughed my arse off for over an hour. It was brilliant.
Yeah. It was great. And he was just there to kind of get the crowd going right at the beginning. And they had a band live on stage, I would say 9 of them, maybe 10 even. They had like a whole 4-part, brass section, 2 percussionists, guitar, all that kind of stuff. All old white men, but one woman. But obviously,
BBC darling.
Basically, all Steve Brown age kind of vintage. So probably people he'd worked with for absolutely decades, and then one young guy. And you know what it's like? It's like even when you go and see, the Rolling Stones or whatever, it's like, okay, one of them's died, and we've got the youngster come in to do it. Anyway, it turned out that the young chap playing the bass was Steve Brown's son.
Okay,
that was a very direct connection.
Very talented boy. Welcome to join us anytime.
So, and Steve Brown's other son is apparently a stand-up comedian, Alfie Brown. I wasn't familiar with him.
Oh, I know Alfie Brown. Right, okay. Sorry, I hadn't put that put 2 and 2 together there.
I'm a bit out of touch with the stand-up comedy world, to be honest with you. So I didn't know him. But so he kind of co-hosted. It was him and Harry Hill kind of doing a bit of bantering and coming back and forth and stuff like that. So that was nice. Very obviously very personal as well. And so the format of the show was acts coming out, doing a bit of music. Almost all the music was stuff written by Steve Brown in some way or another. There was a couple of acts who kind of came out and said, I worked with Steve Brown a lot. He was a real mentor to me. He completely inspired me. Here's a song that I wrote, but, sort of it's about, missing someone, so I thought it was appropriate. Like it wasn't all Steve Brown music, but it was mostly Steve Brown music. So there were a few musical acts that I wasn't familiar with, but, nice stuff. They did a few musical numbers. Steve Brown wrote a musical called Spend, 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 which is about some lottery winners. Yeah. About working class people getting rich. And then there was a couple of numbers from Tony, the musical, which is a musical about Tony Blair, which was written by Harry Hill and Steve Brown.
Oh, that rings a bell.
It's pretty recent. It's still going on.
Rings a very...
They're performing it in Manchester.
It must not be what I'm thinking of then.
Almost, possibly now. So it is a relatively recent thing. And they did some sort of X Factor the musical kind of idea. I can't remember what that was called. It wasn't called X Factor the musical, but that was the concept. I can't remember what that was. But Harry Hill has written a couple of things with him.
This sounds like a much bigger production than the 2 previous. Where was it?
The Savoy. So the theatre at the Savoy. Yeah, big place. I mean, must have been several hundred people there, put it that way. So that was kind of all the music. And then a lot of comedians, because he worked a lot in the comedy world. Sure. So Glenn Ponder in Knowing Me, Knowing You is one of the most famous ones. He did, all the Tony Farino stuff, all the, Steve Coogan's character. That's all Steve Brown. Basically, anytime Steve Coogan is singing, it's probably Steve Brown who's done it.
I see.
So let me have a little think. Who was there? Who did we have? We had Jan Ravens, who
of course.
met Steve Brown through, I think it's probably Spitting Image, but that kind of whole area. And they got married. I think they got married in the 80s.
Oh.
So Alfie Brown is her son.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. They have since they divorced some time ago, and he was remarried to someone else. But she came out and she kind of went, bit of an awkward tone to hit at this type of thing when you're the ex-wife. So that she started with that. So I don't know, no idea what their relationship was like after divorce, but let's presume they kind of got on well enough. They had grandchildren and things to share. So I'm sure it was all fine. John Culshaw in a similar capacity, all the Dead Ringers kind of stuff, all the songs the kind of parody songs they would do and all that kind of thing. Rory Bremner was there as well. And we had Stuart Lee.
Stuart Lee, of course. Well, no, I say of course because Stuart Lee is a bit of a media darling when it comes to this sort of thing. But what did he work with Steve Brown?
Do you know what? I'm not quite sure. They definitely had the same agent, management company back in the day. They were both with Avalon.
Well, Lee and Herring were sort of adjacent to Armando Iannucci and all that.
Yeah.
They sort of separated early on, didn't they? But maybe they knew each other way back then.
But even way back they were talking about stuff they did in the late 80s at Edinburgh. That Steve Brown was involved with. He's just doing the music for all kinds of stuff. Like he was, they would have a comedy troupe and he was the music guy. Like even if it was, improv comedy or whatever. So, he's the tentacles of British comedy. So Stuart Lee was there. Stuart Lee was great, actually. He did a classic kind of Stuart Lee bit in the sense of his classic style. But he was like, I just want to tell you a story about something with me and Steve. And he kind of told this story. And it just developed into a very Stuart Lee style bit of comedy. Yeah. But then that kind of paid off, as it always does, just very funny. And obviously very kind of a Steve Brown story. Like, this is an anecdote from our lives together. And like, there's no way to try that material out, really, is there? You just had to turn up and do it.
I see what you mean.
Like a 10-minute bit where he just had to do it.
It's not a well-rehearsed anecdote.
Yeah, but it was a Stuart Lee bit. It was not just him telling an anecdote. It was a very well-structured and crafted bit of comedy. And at the end, he kind of went, "That's gone down really well, that. It's the first time it's ever worked. I guess you've got to find the right audience." So
very good.
So,
very good.
Yeah, Stuart Lee was fantastic. And then quite near the end, we got Alan Partridge.
Of course.
Specifically Alan Partridge, not Steve Coogan.
Right, so he came out in character. And make it all about himself?
A little bit. But, and kind of... referred to him as Glenn Ponder. He said, I worked with him back in the day when he was Glenn Ponder for tax purposes. Yeah. So that's how they kind of explained that way.
That's good.
Steve Coogan was the only one who was reading his material off a script, which everyone else had kind of came out and managed to do it. But to be fair to him, he is currently... full-on rehearsals of Dr. Strangelove, I suspect. So he's probably a little bit busy.
Yes.
As we speak, Dr. Strangelove is about to start in the West End.
Mm-hmm.
So he was kind of had a piece of paper with him, and he was just sort of reading it out, reading it very well, I may say. It didn't feel like he was not performing. It was very good.
I think that's all right. I think you can forgive that.
Yeah, and he did a couple of songs, which he didn't have to read. These are songs from the old days. One was a rap. Which they very sort of self-consciously was like, yes, they said I should do a rap to get down with Gen Z and all this sort of thing. So that was funny. And then he did a Tony Farino song, which but he did it as Alan Partridge and sort of just presented it as like, I'm going to do a song. It was a duet. Got someone else out to do it with him, but it was a Tony Farino song. It's one of the classics. It's the one where he has sex with the au pair. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, another one.
Yeah. So yeah, that was that, and some other. Do you know what? It was surprisingly unsentimental. People didn't come out and
that's good.
People came out and said like, Steve was great, everyone loved him, and this was what he meant to me, and here's a song. But it didn't really get kind of teary or too kind of, we just want to pay tribute. I guess they were we're kind of 6 months in. This isn't Awake. It's 6 months since 7 months since he died.
Yes.
So maybe they've kind of made
tribute, not a memorial.
Yeah. One nice bit was Alfie Brown brought his daughter out, who must have been about 6 or 7, and she, with his help, sort of sang a song that Steve Brown had written, because it was something along the lines of their local school or whatever wanted a nativity a sort of like not too
Right.
Christian secular nativity Christmas show, and he went,
Okay.
"Right, yeah, no worries," and like knocked out a 9-song nativity for them. Like, so she
Nice.
sang one of those, and
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
very sweet. Everyone was just kind of a sweet little girl singing a song with her dad there, kind of supporting her. So that was really nice. So little bits of things like that, but mostly people were kind of just like, "Hey, he was a great guy and inspiring," and here's a bit of his work. But really good evening, really great.
You know what? I genuinely feel like quite uplifted. Not only you've explained that really well, but like you've not been cynical about it. That's lovely.
No,
Well
it
done.
was great. It really was great, and it was a packed house. Everyone was doing it for free, but the tickets certainly weren't free. I don't know exactly where that money's going. No charity was mentioned, so I don't know if it's going to the Steve Brown.
I got the family maybe.
Steve Brown didn't have insurance fund, something like that.
I'm alright with that.
Yeah,
feel like you got
exactly.
your
I
money's
paid
worth,
the ticket
it's
to see
okay.
the show. I'm all right with that. Yeah. So a nice little thing. A one-off thing as well. I was really glad I could go. It was fantastic.
Yeah, once in a lifetime, but yeah, a one-off.
And seeing, it was all acts that I remember from 20 and 30 years ago, so it's perfect for me.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's move on, lest we make this bonus episode overly long.
Yeah.
So the fourth thing that you went to see in the late summer was a Hancock's half hour, longer than half hour. What was it? What was the show?
It was 3 episodes of Hancock's Half Hour, just buttered together.
But you said they were lost episodes.
I think they were lost episodes. I'm imagining that. This company have definitely done like the lost episodes. Because, there's many episodes of Hancock that don't exist, but the scripts are still extant. So,
Sure.
That's why, do those ones. May as well bring those to life rather than the ones we can already watch. That makes sense. The company that did this are called Hambledon Productions, and I think you are familiar with them because
I think I went to see them do a Steptoe and Son show a couple of years ago, where they were on stage, and the conceit was it was 2 actors recording a radio show. Mm-hmm. So that meant that they didn't have to do all the they could get away with doing sort of Foley sound effects, and they didn't have to have all the sets.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is
but it
the same.
Very well.
It is the same company, yeah. So Hambledon Productions. So I looked into it. It's a brother-sister team behind the actual company, and they've been doing it since they were teenagers. And the brother of that team is the guy who's in everything. So he's the one who was playing Hancock. He's the one who played Harold Steptoe in what you saw. He plays Tommy Cooper in a Tommy Cooper show they do. Et cetera, et cetera. He's obviously got a real passion for the kind of old school comedy. Nothing wrong with that.
Well, yeah, far be it from me.
And you know what? I really respect what they do, and I like what they do. It's the sort of thing I would like to do, And they don't just do kind of old classic stuff like that. They do all kinds of other things. But that's obviously something they go back to quite a lot. And in fact, when I looked into it on their website, they did a version of a Hancock's Half Hour 12 years ago. So, like, they were doing it back then.
Right, yeah.
That struck me because the guy who's playing Hancock in this I think he's about 35, but he looked too young. He just sort of looked too young. The guy who they had played Sid James looked too young. But they were both the same cast they had 12 years ago. So they were doing this when they were about 23 or something. And I don't know. I don't know if that would work that well.
But they are very knowingly doing impressions of Sid James and Tony Hancock. They're not just performing the scripts in a different way.
Yes. This is a tough one to gauge, isn't it? And in full disclosure, I auditioned for this. I auditioned.
Okay, I didn't know that.
I auditioned to play Sid James, and I can't do a particularly good Sid James impression, but I like I say, I really liked the idea and the project.
Come on, Alan, you've got to have to do the audition tape now.
I can't.
What was the line reading you had to do?
I can't bring myself to do it. But I actually genuinely worked on it and like tried to get that accent a little bit. I think I've got the video of me because it was a tape I did. I'll drop a bit in here.
Mate,
I can't do it live, but I'll drop it in. Lot 1 is this beautiful example of a stuffed golden eagle. A collector's item, gentlemen. A better specimen is yet to be stuffed. This fine, exquisite bird is a treasure that no connoisseur can afford not to have in his own. Now, do I hear 5 bob? But yeah, look, I'm no Sid James impressionist. So, but I just kind of really wanted to put myself up for it because I was like, oh, that'd be fun. I'd like to do that. But I didn't think I was particularly right for the part. Having said that, the guy who was playing Sid James was no better than I was at doing a Sid James impression. So that obviously wasn't a priority, like be a perfect voice or anything like that.
Sure.
But I do think it suffered from doing an impression, or like even if it's not a good impression, trying to copy a mannerisms and a characterization rather than just letting your actors come to their own characters. That's a difficult thing to do in that situation. I don't know what the answer is. If you kind of have different characterizations, people aren't going to like it.
Yeah,
you kind of have to do that. But then there's a subtle skill to bringing that to life in a different way, and it didn't quite work for me on that level. The main guy who plays Hancock, I've seen clips of him do Harold Steptoe, which I think he does quite well. His Tommy Cooper is a bit ropey, if you ask me, but. You know, he was doing all the pauses that Tony Hancock does. He was doing kind of all the little mannerisms and pauses, and it just didn't quite work. It felt like it wasn't alive somehow. It felt like it was someone doing an impression somehow. And
I think that's a difficulty, isn't it?
It is very difficult. I don't want to be too harsh.
Because you can, no matter whether the impression is good or bad, if you lose yourself in trying to get the impression right, then you're sort of losing the acting, dear boy.
Yeah. Yeah, and all those little mannerisms and pauses of Tony Hancock came from an organic place. And, you're pausing for laughter, which, if you're not particularly getting the same laughs in whatever environment you are, it doesn't quite work. And so so I think the pace was affected. I think it felt quite slow.
I see.
And plus a lot of the things that Tony Hancock did were as a consequence of him struggling to think of what the next line was. All his little moments and things like that. He always struggled with that stuff. So, I think there's a lot of that going on. And like I say, he felt too young. And I don't think it's like, oh, you got to be the right age. You've got to look exactly right. Or anything. It just, there's a world weariness to Hancock. That's kind of part of the character. And he just seemed a bit too cherubic and young. Yeah, the Sid James guy was kind of, had a basic Sid James. It didn't feel like he was trying to do an impression, and it that lacked a bit of energy as well. The whole thing was a bit slow.
I think this theatrical criticism is, you probably shouldn't have told us your full disclosure, because it just sounds like sour grapes.
I don't know. I think maybe the direction just needed to be a bit sharper. Maybe they just needed to kind of everything tightened up a bit. The guy who was doing the Kenneth Williams character was really good in terms of a good Kenneth Williams impression. And a good impression without kind of losing a sense of character. And then when he was playing other characters as well, did a really nice job. There were two women in it as well, playing female characters who would have been played by Hattie Jakes and people like that. And I know some of the characterizations were a bit broad in a way that I don't associate with Hancock particularly. Just a bit silly. The set was very nice. They put a lot of effort into
What was the set then? Because as I said, the Steptoe one was a radio studio. That was the set.
I mean, it was essentially, the flat, East Cheam, railway cuttings, East Cheam. So it was, a house, but then it occasionally converted into a solicitor's office and things like that. They had a desk there that kind of just rolled away when they didn't need it. And they really used the set very well, and it was very specifically designed for the show they were doing, with some pretty, high-end stuff, like a whole kind of roll-away desk that could be converted into another thing, and then, a stuffed bird and all sorts of stuff. It was, very good. Yeah. It was a nice little production. Just needed to be tighter, I think.
Right.
And it was 3 episodes back to back. Certainly absolutely no attempt to kind of make a full piece. It was just like they did a half-hour show and then they went kind of cut, next, start again. And they literally did the intro like BBC presents Hancock's half hour. Yeah,
well, I suppose what else do you do? It's difficult you come out of character and sort of introduce them. This was written in such and such, and that sort of takes people out of the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it was fine. It was presented as these are 3 episodes of Hancock's half hour, and I wasn't expecting anything else.
Well, thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, Alan, for going out there into that London and braving these shows. But most of all, thanks for telling us all about it. And we'll have a couple more bonus episodes for you in between now and our next series, of which more later. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.